The last thing you see clearly is the tunnel entrance shrinking behind you. Then the headlamp battery dies, and the darkness is total. Not dim, not adjustable. Absolute. Most people have never experienced light deprivation this complete. Not even on the darkest night. In a room, there's always a sliver under the door, a glow from a device, a faint streetlight. In a sealed cave or an isolation chamber, there is nothing for the eye to process at all. Within minutes, your visual cortex begins doing something unexpected. It starts generating input on its own. Faint shapes, edges, movement that isn't there. This is called phosphine activity, and it's not a malfunction. It's your brain refusing to accept that a major sensory channel has gone completely silent. The shapes aren't hallucinations yet, they're more like static. Your visual system trying to stay warm. In the first hour, the body isn't in danger, but the mind is already working against you. You sit still, trying to conserve the phone battery, already aware the light is gone. Your breathing is slightly faster than it should be. You notice it, then try to slow it down. Your hands find the wall automatically. Cold, damp limestone. The first real psychological pressure isn't fear exactly, it's the absence of reference. Without light, you have no horizon, no distance, no sense of how large the space around you is. Your spatial memory starts filling that gap, but it degrades quickly without reinforcement. After about 90 minutes in complete darkness, most people lose confident sense of direction. This isn't panic, it feels more like mild confusion, a low-level wrongness that's hard to name. Around the 2-hour mark, something shifts in how time feels. Without light cues, the brain's internal clock loses its primary anchor. Your circadian rhythm is driven partly by photoreceptors in your eyes that detect blue spectrum light. They're called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. But what matters is what they do. They send signals directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, your body's master clock. In total darkness, that signal stops. The clock doesn't stop, but it starts to drift. Studies on cave isolation have shown that without light, humans naturally shift to a longer day cycle. Some subjects drifted toward 25, even 48-hour perceived days without realizing it. Time starts to feel elastic, slow and thick in some moments, then suddenly compressed. You might feel like 2 hours have passed when it's been 20 minutes. Or you sleep, wake up, and have no idea whether it's been 4 hours or 12. By the 6-hour mark in real darkness, your melatonin levels begin behaving abnormally. Melatonin production is triggered by darkness and suppressed by light. Your body knows this rhythm. But in permanent darkness, the normal on-off cycle loses its structure. The pineal gland keeps producing melatonin in irregular surges, which makes you feel drowsy at odd times. You might feel an overwhelming urge to sleep after 3 hours, then feel wide awake 2 hours later. This disrupted hormonal rhythm is one of the earliest physical signs that the system is under pressure. It's not dangerous at this stage, but it begins affecting your decision quality almost immediately. Tired thinking in a dark cave is a compounding problem, not a simple inconvenience. By 12 hours, the body's core temperature regulation starts to show subtle instability. Light exposure normally helps calibrate the slight daily temperature oscillation your body maintains. Without it, that oscillation becomes less predictable, not catastrophically, but noticeably. You might feel cold even if the ambient temperature hasn't changed. Your appetite signals also shift. Some people lose hunger cues entirely in extended darkness. Others feel unexpectedly hungry at irregular intervals, disconnected from any real metabolic need. The common assumption is that darkness is restful, that removing light means the body relaxes. That's not quite accurate. Sensory deprivation triggers a stress response in many people. Cortisol levels, normally tied to light-driven wake cycles, become erratic within the first day. The body interprets the absence of its most fundamental orientation signal as a form of threat, not an immediate threat. Not something that raises your heart rate sharply, but a slow background stress that raises baseline cortisol and keeps the system from fully resting. By 24 hours, the psychological effects are often more destabilizing than the physical ones. The visual cortex, still starved of input, begins producing more elaborate internal images. This is the stage where genuine hallucinations can begin, not for everyone, but for many. Simple geometric patterns at first. Then more complex imagery that the brain can't quite control. Several cave isolation subjects reported hearing sounds that weren't present. Voices, distant water, movement. Auditory hallucinations in total darkness aren't well understood, but sensory deprivation research has documented them. The brain appears to lower its threshold for perception when input disappears, filling silence with invented signals. This is important because it directly affects judgment. If you're lost in a dark tunnel and you believe you heard something, you may move toward it. Movement without vision in an uneven space is where physical danger accelerates sharply. By the second day, something quieter and more dangerous is happening inside the body. Your immune system, which runs on circadian timing, starts losing its normal rhythm of activity. Certain immune functions peak at specific times of day. That timing depends on light-regulated hormones. In prolonged darkness, those peaks flatten. The system doesn't shut down, but it becomes less coordinated. You won't feel it as a symptom. That's part of what makes it subtle. What you will feel is a growing heaviness, not quite fatigue, not quite illness, something between the two. Your reaction time slows. Simple decisions take longer than they should. You reach for something and misjudge the distance by several inches. Your proprioception, your body's sense of its own position in space, becomes slightly unreliable. This matters more than it sounds. In a dark, uneven environment, unreliable proprioception causes falls. Falls in confined spaces without light mean injuries you cannot properly assess, treat, or navigate around. Around 36 hours, the emotional regulation system begins showing real strain. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational planning and impulse control, is sensitive to sleep disruption, and sleep in total darkness is rarely clean, even when exhaustion forces it. Without light anchoring your sleep cycles, you cycle through REM irregularly, often waking mid-cycle feeling worse. The kind of thinking you need most, calm, sequential, patient, is exactly what degrades first. What tends to remain longer is emotional reactivity. Fear responses stay sharp even as reasoning dulls. This mismatch is one of the more dangerous features of prolonged darkness exposure. You feel urgency without clarity. You want to move without knowing where. The instinct to do something, anything, strengthens exactly when doing nothing is often the safer choice. Several documented cave rescue cases involve survivors who moved away from their last known position in the dark. That movement, driven by anxiety and deteriorating judgment, made them significantly harder to locate. Staying still in darkness feels psychologically unbearable after a certain threshold. The body pushes against it. Understanding that pressure exists before you're inside it is one of the few things that counteracts it. By 48 hours, the physical picture is more complex than most people expect. You're not dying from darkness itself. Darkness is not directly toxic to human tissue. What's happening is a cascade of disrupted systems, each one slightly off, each one affecting the next. Hormonal dysregulation affects sleep. Disrupted sleep affects cognition. Impaired cognition affects movement. Poor movement causes injury. The body can survive total darkness for days, possibly longer, depending on temperature, hydration, and baseline health. Some cave isolation experiments ran subjects for weeks. They emerged disoriented but physically intact. But those were controlled environments. Stable temperature, supplied food and water, no navigation pressure, no injury risk. Strip those conditions away and the timeline compresses significantly. Cold accelerates everything. A cave at 10 degrees Celsius pulls heat from the body continuously. Wet clothing against skin increases conductive heat loss by a factor that makes cold air feel mild by comparison. Without light, you may not notice how cold you're becoming until your fingers lose dexterity. Shivering stops feeling like a warning and starts feeling like background noise, and that's when it matters most. Dehydration in darkness is underestimated because thirst signals also follow circadian patterns. In a disrupted light environment, your thirst response can quiet even when your body genuinely needs water. You stop feeling thirsty? You stop drinking. Dehydration compounds cognitive impairment that was already building. By 72 hours, if conditions are harsh, the compounding nature of these failures becomes very difficult to reverse. The mind at this stage is not the mind that entered the darkness 3 days earlier. It is slower, more reactive, less able to assess its own condition accurately. One of the consistent findings from isolation research is that subjects underestimate their own degradation. They believe they are thinking clearly at a point when their test scores show significant impairment. This is not weakness. It's a feature of how cognitive decline works. The judgment system fails before the person notices. That gap between actual state and perceived state is where the most critical errors happen. Real rescues of people lost in dark environments often happen because someone on the outside made the call, not because the person inside accurately assessed their own situation and acted on it correctly. This is worth holding on to. The value of telling someone your location before you enter any dark or confined space. Not as a formality, as a functional safety mechanism that works precisely when your own judgment can't. If you're serious about caving, underground navigation, or any environment where light can fail, real training matters. not YouTube knowledge. Structured training, practice skills, and ideally a qualified guide who knows the specific terrain. What complete darkness actually does to a human body is not dramatic in the way survival content usually frames it. It's quieter than that. Slower, a gradual erosion of the systems that keep you oriented and capable. The light your body needs isn't just for vision. It's for timing, for hormones, for sleep architecture, for immune function, for emotional regulation. Remove it long enough, under the wrong conditions, and the consequences compound in ways that are genuinely hard to reverse. The most dangerous moment isn't when the light first goes out. It's around day 2 when you feel functional enough to make a move, but your judgment has already been quietly compromised.